Hey everybody, I'm Sean Robinson.
I'm Carson Grubaugh. Welcome to Living the Line.
And today we've got a very special guest who you can already see his face, so it's not really a surprise. But Brandon, how you doing, man?
Good morning, guys. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on here.
Yeah, of
Of
course.
course.
So we've got Brandon here on the occasion of the pre-orders being open for Moonray Book 2. This is the latest installment of the Moonray saga. Brandon has put together it's a 160-page book, and Brandon, what was like three-quarters of it is you this time, right? And Sure Show is like something like 28 pages.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah,
Yeah.
similar to book one. If people saw that at all, it's just a big chunk of the main story by me, and then kind of like a science fiction western backup that I wrote that Sure Show drew.
Right. And one of the things we always kind of bump into when we're talking to people whose books aren't out yet, which I'm assuming everyone watching this has, of course, read book one, bought 10
Better.
copies, gave it all your relatives, things like that. But if you haven't
Started
done
a
that
little
yet,
fire in their home with it.
exactly right. Yeah, you've got so many that you need to keep warm with it. But if you haven't done that yet, we have one of the ways it's kind of nice to be able to talk about something that you haven't read yet is to just sort of go through the art. And we've talked to you a bunch now about a lot of your books, including Rain Like Hammers, which came out in 2018, right? And also Multiple Warheads. And obviously, you, in addition to the two of us, are process nerd in the sense that, you're interested in how other cartoonists make things and things along those lines. So I thought we could kind of maybe dissect some of your pages for Moonray under that sort of lens.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Awesome.
And
So you're
we're going to be looking specifically at your coloring process today, correct? Which is, I think, one of the things that is, I mean, obviously your pen and ink work is very distinctively yours too, but there's something about the way you use color that makes your books very much uniquely yours. And so
Sure.
I'm pretty excited to get this peek into how you work.
will you show us that spread that you just finished, just so we get an idea of what the starting point is for the
Oh
artwork?
yeah. So I do most of my pages on these 11 by 17, and this is a two-page spread of, I don't know how visible it is, but it's these two
Uh,
characters kind of walking along a this weird alien building here that connects to a beating heart at the end of it.
Mm.
And I was telling you guys before we started recording, the plan is to take all these kind of pillars, these slats in the window here, and have a bright light coming from behind it, so I can show the perspective of the page by kind of shooting the shadows out.
Mm. Hmm.
It's one of those
And
things that I normally do. I might do that in ink, do the shadows in ink, but with this one, I was just feeling cocky enough to be like, I'll just figure out in Photoshop.
and
and
while you've got that paper up, um, I've heard that you are really clever about the paper that you use. Can you talk about the paper you use? Because it's not quite the typical uh Bristol board, is it?
Oh, sure. Just I think just because I have to work a lot and comics paper is expensive. Like basically, if you go to art supply store, you get like 20 sheets for $15 or something crazy like that. And so I
Hmm.
go to office supply stores and buy these 200 bulk sheets for $10 or 10 or $15.
And is it a little bit? It's not like a 3-ply; it's a 1-ply Bristol board, so it's
It's
not
two
quite
ply. I
as
used to
heavy.
actually get this stuff because you could run it through a photocopier. Because my old coloring
Okay.
process was that I would. This is like in the 90s, or early 2000s. I would take a black and white drawing and I would run it through a photocopier onto brown or blue paper of the same type, and then I would color up from that using like markers and white paint.
Okay.
And there's no real need for me to do that anymore, except for I got used to working on this kind of paper, and I find it really, it's just thick enough to not crumple when you're erasing, but it's thin enough that you can run it through a photocopier, and a big thing for me is not feeling precious about the work I'm doing, because I think if you have this beautiful piece of paper in front of you, it's hard to just get comfortable and mess around. So I like that this paper is just um, not that important to me.
where I got to handle some of your originals when we did the first Moonray campaign. We did like this one. We pre-sold a lot of the pages where
Mhm.
people could look at thumbnails of them on the website and pick them out and get them as part of the Kickstarter campaign. And so since I ended up shipping out whatever the 30 something pages, I got to actually handle them. And I was surprised to see how much the thumbnailing or sort of false starts and stuff were on the back of the page.
Oh, sure.
And how much is it for a pack of 250 at the Office Depot or wherever you're going?
What's that?
How much is it for the stack of 250 that you're going getting from the office supply store?
I think it's probably it's maybe 15 or 20 bucks.
So cheaper or the same as like a 18 by 24 stack of Bristol board.
Yeah,
I got to start doing what you do. I just ordered 30 pieces of 40 by 30 Bristol board, and that cost me 500 bucks.
Oh,
for
yeah.
30
and I do
drawings.
other stuff different sizes. I have one of my Fortnite drawings here. This thing is this big.
Oh yeah,
It's for Fortnite.
that's a nice big one.
Just because I imagine people. And I have a bunch of weird old art here. Here's some storyboards for Adventure Time that I did on this specific Adventure Time paper, which only has 2 things per page, which I was always confused by for storyboards, but you just burn through a million of those. And then what else have I got here? I have a original page by Adam Warren.
Oh, nice.
Which
Dirty
is,
Pair.
Yeah, it's from his Dirty Pair series, and this is done on vellum, where I think he was inking it. He was penciling it on paper, and then he would put it onto this frosted vellum, which is the same stuff Jeff Darrow uses. So it's kind of frosted plastic.
So he could save the pencils and have that on its own.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's like it works kind of like its own light table, where if it's pressed up against the paper, you can see through it, but as soon as you lift it up a little bit, you can't see through it.
Yeah, the only other cartoonist I know of that inks on vellum is Mahendra Singh, a guy who did like a lot of interesting books, Hunting of the Snark, Lewis Carroll adaptation.
Right, Jeff Darrow, I think, did his hard-boiled pages on like this.
I tried it for a while because I was really frustrated with the Bristol board that I was using at the time bleeding a little bit.
Yeah.
So I switched over to vellum because of that plastic quality. The ink like sits on there super slick and clean looking. Is another benefit of it.
But before we look at your color, I did want to ask you one more thing about that particular page because you know it gets to one of the things that we've kind of talked about a lot about the visual side of your work, and especially happening in Moonray, which is the scale, not just scale shifts, but also just like communicating scale on paper. And you know, obviously in that particular composition, like we have a really good idea of the size of the figures and things like that. I mean, how much of your awareness of a page does that like occupy when you're like composing, or is that something that you're thinking like I want to make this thing really, really huge?
Yeah, I mean with Moonray specifically, because in Moonray the characters don't have faces, so there's not that much need for close-ups all the time.
Right.
And it might be like, you know, I'm wearing my Tintin shirt today.
Right.
A lot of it might be like Harrogate doesn't really, or I'm butchering his name always, Ergay, I think it's pronounced. He didn't do close-ups unless it was like a sign or a hands or something holding something. He would never show close-ups of a character's face.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I've noticed recently I have to kind of rein myself a little bit, because with Moonray I want things to be so big and expansive that I'm just drawing the characters tiny all the time and drawing big landscapes and I think something that I really enjoy about comic books is drawing like comics are often very figure centric, like you draw it, but people, you know, especially in American comics, people kind of forget the backgrounds. And I think one of the funnest things about it for me is you have a cool character you've designed and then you can put them in a real world. It's like, and it adds a reality to it where, you know, suddenly Mickey Mouse is like picking up a rock that the reader can recognize, like, oh, that looks like a mossy rock that I've seen on a walk here. That makes makes the work so much more relatable.
Right, and that seems to be part of the more European, that with your colors, which we're going to look at in just a second, seems to be where you get that really European vibe in your work. Is they're much more likely to show the entire environment, and then your color palette also seems very European influenced.
Yeah, I'll often go back and look. Like there's different colorists that I look at their work and think about, like Inky Bilal, you know, the guy who did the Woman Trap and the Nicopol trilogy. His work is so, like, he got really into doing characters with white faces and bright red or blue hair. And so I'll think of his stuff a lot, especially when he does rust on the side of buildings. It really stands out. But there's people like Mobius that are just like so in my DNA that like I will get really confident about like, oh, this is my coloring style. I do this. And then I'll look back at a Mobius book and just be like, oh, that's where I got that. You know, keeps you humble.
Yeah.
Well, we've delayed here for about 8 minutes, so let's take a look at the actual not the finished product, but the in process color.
Sure. Let's see. I will do the Photoshop share here.
That's right. I'm accusing you of being long-winded. That's a joke there.
I will. Yeah. So here's one of my kind of basic pages. I'll take it off the lettering layer. I mean, that's something else we can talk about is kind of how I've gone about lettering since starting to work Live in the Line has changed a bit too.
Yeah, so this is pretty new for you, right? In terms of, I mean, you worked with the font for a couple of years now, but
yeah, but Moonray is the first book that I've done with a font.
Right.
Yeah. So this is basically I scan in the page and I have take out the lettering and I have this basic version of it. And sometimes I'll do, like you can see I'm doing some of the handwritten text of just a made up alien language here.
Right.
And I do my sound effects on the page. But then I'll let's see here. And then I have like basically I'll do a base color level. Like in this one, it's like this. Like here's a gradient to just be like, this is what the top panel sky is like. And then I do an overlay.
That is a gradient. So look carefully, everybody. You'll see that there's actually a change there. It's subtle,
I do really
right?
Subtle. I used to be really anti-gradient, and that shifted a lot when I got more into. So I probably talked about it to you guys about before. When I went really deep into like a Tintin deep dive during the pandemic, it led me into looking at a lot of Japanese woodblock print stuff that Ergay was looking at, and they do gradients in a really nice, subtle way that I started to pick up much more in the Moonray stuff.
Yeah, in a woodblock, because they didn't actually print that many, even though they were a mass medium in comparison to other things at the time. It's not like they were doing like 100,000 of them or 200,000 of them or 300,000 of them. So this was a special effect you could do with a block. You can actually, you can do this yourself with linoleum or something if you want to. You just ink it with different proportions before you hit the roller. And so you can kind of calibrate that over time, and they did test prints and things like that to work out the exact ratio.
Yeah, and the guy that I've got most into this Hiroshi Yoshida, who's doing these amazing things about 100 years ago. This page that I have on here is basically a ripoff of Hiroshi Yoshida thing. I can show you. Let's see if I have the thing up next to it. Yeah, so this is the Hiroshi Yoshida page that I was looking at for that, and you can see I pretty much just did what he did.
Gorgeous.
Ooh, yeah, man, that's the water on that is nuts.
Yeah, and even looking at this, it's like, even though he was doing this stuff by hand with woodblock prints, and I'm working on Photoshop, I didn't go as crazy as he went. Like you can see a subtle gold, like the yellow he's doing on the light here. Like I just did very simple, just like here's the shadow on the.
Well, and go back to that real quick. Like for people that don't know, I'm assuming most of our viewers would, but for a wood block, every color you see on there is a separate block of wood, and the color has been left alone, and everything else has been carved out. So you're basically making like a stamp, and then when you have gradients, you're manipulating that stamp. So God knows how many blocks would have had to go into making that. That's insane.
This is 5 or 6 blocks probably.
Yeah. He's really interesting because he was the guy that really championed not doing collaborative work with his woodblock prints, because it was always done as essentially an assembly line where they had a bunch of artists all working together to mass produce these prints. And he was the first guy that's like, no, I want to do everything myself, and his work looked so much better for it. And he traveled too, so you can find, like, this is something he did in India. He did stuff in Egypt and North America and Europe. So he has these great prints that, like, there's one of the Pacific Northwest. He did some prints of just like the mountains there that are really beautiful.
It's very interesting to see
All this
the
stuff in like 1912 or something.
Gorgeous.
look at the line de-emphasis here. That's something that I've seen you carry over into the new Moonray book as well. Like if you look at the essentially you've got atmospheric perspective here, where the castle in the background is not being reinforced by all the blocks. It's only being carried by the whatever the brownish color is. So
Yeah,
is
like a
that
colored
specifically
line.
where you picked that up from, Brandon, or is that just sort of something that's in the water right now?
I do it somewhat in Moonray, but I don't do it on this level because I feel like this way leads to insanity when you start doing atmospheric perspective stuff, because I'll just try to ink it lighter, but
Right.
like I'll only have like I'll mess with the actual line color if I'm going to have a thing where the characters are in a fog or there's
Right.
some severe lighting going on. Because I mean, something that's been really interesting to me about Moonray is that I'm trying to work at a faster pace than I did in my previous books for, and so I'm trying to make it look as high quality, but I'm still trying to figure out ways to get the stuff done.
Yeah.
But you're doing a little bit more like this also, where you will just let color define, like in the lake, it's all just color. I mean, it's much more like painting, or the shadows on the arch there, where it's just color against color. And I feel like I'm seeing more and more of that in your work, which is leading to this more like open poetic feel. Whereas your older work, you'd be like so dense with details and jokes and posters and
Sure.
stuff. And the color use seems to be replacing a lot of that pen and ink work now.
Yeah, certainly. And I think in the past I was much more concerned with the idea of making my originals pretty and like having a finished page that I really liked how it looked. And
Hmm.
these days I'm much more concerned with how it looks in print,
Hmm.
Right.
which I think is a hard, like there's a bunch of things that kind of kill your ego a little bit. Like you want to do a picture and be like, this is a beautiful picture by itself that I can look at. But that doesn't really help you when the printed comic is the only thing that anyone else sees.
Yeah, and
Well,
I think doing this channel and working with Sean has started gearing me towards that as well, where I'm much more willing to do like 5 different drawings that get composted together to make it. I'm starting to think of myself as a printmaker now instead
Sure.
of like a painter or someone who draws.
well,
Yeah. And I was going to say working with Sean and also working previously, I was working with when I was doing my books with Image, and I had Trisha Ramos doing the production work on that. Like she kind of started to teach me how to do pre-press stuff, because I was just used to just handing over pages, and then little simple things like her telling me about how to make sure if I'm doing a balloon, I should see if I have some pages that are that actual stuff. If I have a word balloon, to fill in all the color behind it. So I have these word balloons on here, and it's just like solid white on them now. Where before you could see, like I would just bucket fill it and you would see all the words back there. And the problem with that is that when it prints, if the plate shifts at all, then you get this weird halo of the colored line underneath it. And just knowing that and working more with Sean about the stuff has really changed just how I've done my undercoloring. So basically I will have all these layers that are just I don't know, there's a bad example, but I'll just have like a block of color that goes way under something, so I don't have to worry about the plate shifting as much.
yeah, and if you would take us through like basically like what your process would be like layer for layer, I think that would be pretty interesting. If just pick one of these pages and sort of show us like how it's starting.
Normal, because I picked a lot of colored specific pages, but let's see if I have kind of a more normal page. I mean, I guess this one doesn't have lettering on it, but yeah, I can kind of start over on. Oh, and this is showing an example of me actually graying out
Okay.
some of the lines. And yeah, so what I'm doing here is so I have I take the page and I scan in, and then I make another layer that is just the same page, but I've knocked the opacity down. And I think this is one of the things that, Sean, I think you gave me some advice on how to do this differently. And
Right.
because I have some pages where I'm doing both the knockdown opacity and the solid black lines on the same level, and it just makes your job a lot harder.
Right. Yeah. Because I'm coming back in after the fact and doing various things to the line art layer, and that was a challenge on some of them where they were combined. But yeah, this is perfect. Here.
Cool. Yeah. So I have that, and it just makes this kind of thing in the distance more. And you can see I'm just going up here and I'm erasing the things that I want to be grayed out.
It's interesting to see that you left the white up there. I guess that doesn't have any impact
No.
on the final piece, but it kind of adds a sense of lighting as it stands.
Yeah. And if I have
These
this
are both
black,
these are both in multiply mode, so
Yeah.
which only makes things darker. So white is doesn't affect it yet. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and I was saying I have a bottom layer that's just solid white, so
Right.
I'm actually going up here and just erasing it. And I probably, like, I don't think I'm even seeing the parts that are not being erased. I'm just seeing it's solid black and what is gray.
Yeah.
And then let's see, yeah, so you can see I have these very flat. Like sometimes I'll just go in and take the kind of lightest color that covers everything and just do a whole layer of just that,
Right.
just so it covers up everything behind it. And then on top of that, I'll sometimes do like a shadow layer. And a lot of these are like the opacities knocked down on these too. So I can just pick one gray color and overlay it over a big section and use it for shadow.
Can you put, well, I don't know if it will mess the page up, where you got it on 30%. So you've got a multiply layer with that one gray color, and then can you pull the opacity back and forth on that layer just so people can see like.
So if I go up to, so you can see it's this shadow.
Right.
Is I think what I'm actually doing here, if I take off the color, it's kind of a green. Because I want everything in this thing to kind of have green lighting because it's all green background. So yeah, I'm just taking that. Sometimes what I'll do, I can make a new layer here. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll just go in and, like, if you click on a section and then make a line on it and then just multiply that. And oh, I went off it. So if you just have like a multiplied thing, then you can just select the color that's on and do a darker version of it.
And so you're putting the same color over top of itself and just like doubling how dark it is. But the other thing about the way that you're doing it is you're creating, and this is one of the things about your colors, is they're so harmonious. And because you have the one color mapping over everything, it builds in an automatic harmony across the page.
Yeah, I think it's kind of I never was much of a painter, but my understanding is a lot of painters will put down a flat color and then work up from that. And my version of that is when I was younger, I would see what's his name? Egon Schiele would work on brown paper a lot and then add all of his white with white paint, and it makes everything, like, if you take a brown sheet of paper and just add a little bit of color and then add the whites of eyes and a little bit of a white background, it immediately looks like a full color picture with like two colors.
Yeah, that's like tone drawing with Conte on a tone paper. And you're correct. This is pretty much exactly, I was surprised that Sean was surprised at how you worked, because this is always the way that I worked, like when I was a teenager, is you get all your flat colors, use a multiply layer for your shadows and adjust the opacity, and then you use like a normal layer and adjust the opacity for any lights that you want to put. And when I transitioned to being a painter, that immediately set me up for understanding how to use glazes, which is like you'll make transparent darks over top of each other to make the shadows deeper, and you'll mix a little bit of white to make your translucent, like foggy layers to get the lights. And it corresponded very, very well to working with layers in Photoshop. And so it was totally natural for me to switch to oil painting.
Oh, nice. That makes sense. Another thing I've noticed is every time I have stars in anything, I'm always
profit stars.
What's that?
The profit stars.
Yeah. I have one sheet of stars that I took a giant sheet of paper and just splattered with a toothbrush maybe a decade ago and scanned it. And I just take little sections of that and always use it the same. So I have a file that is just called stars that I open up and copy and paste.
I swear to God, I've recognized portions of it because it's in you have it in the first spread of the first profit collection.
Right.
you use the full sheet.
Yeah.
Presumably that was what you made it for. But there's that one cluster of stars that I recognized on the cover of something. And I was like, oh, there it is.
Yeah, yeah. And I kind of like that. Like it's a weird technique to do, but I think it is something kind of nice because it's like in my head, it's almost the idea of like you're looking at the same stars no matter where in the universe you are.
Sure.
Yeah. And that's the thinking like a printmaker more, whereas like I think I would always be tempted to do a splatter just for that page or try and do it in the original art and adjust it afterwards.
Sure. So something I wanted to talk about in this too is the idea of how I'll use a lot of very simple colors to make a mood for a thing. And this was initially started as like a time-saving thing when we were doing Prophet. Because I would Joseph Bergen did most of the coloring on Prophet, but I would come in and help him sometimes on pages, and I would try to come up with, because we were a bunch of non-monthly artists suddenly working monthly. We'd come up with these techniques to get the issue colored faster by basically being like, and then they go into underground bunker and everything's red there, and it just made things so much. There was a Farrell Dalrymple drawn issue where he did this huge amount of detail in it, and we had like 2 weeks to get it all colored. And so I think Joseph and Farrell came up with the idea of a character falling into like in the actual story, in the main story, a character falls into a field that kind of messes with his ability to think. He's like this slave field that makes you just a worker. And when he falls into the field, everything goes black and white, except for when he cuts somebody and it's red. So with the story aspect that allowed us just to do essentially a monochrome comic that worked with the story and also saved us a ton of time.
Right.
Speaking of time saving, I'm assuming you're using like paint bucket tool throughout this. How like anytime I use paint bucket tool in Photoshop, it always is winding up like not filling everything in. What's your like actual process of getting the colors on there? What tools do you use?
So yeah, I guess a couple things. When I scan a page in, I first I just knock the opacity all the way up. So if you go into the black lines, they're like there's very little, like it's I don't know what that guy's doing there, but it's supposed to be just solid black. So I can just bucket fill things and get close to it. But one of the things I'm talking about and kind of learning to work with pre-press stuff better is I'll now do much more. Let me see if I take off the thing here. I'll do just like much larger fills on things. So
right.
So I'm not necessarily just bucket filling stuff as much as I'm like selecting big areas. Like I think this is probably a thing I've gone in and flattened, where I would guess that I probably put down just this pink layer here,
right,
and then started adding sections of the darker pink. And like if I was smarter, like what I'm talking about is basically taking a section like this and maybe taking a lasso and like taking a whole section and just like filling it so it's this solid chunk in case the plate shifts at all, so you don't get these lighter pink lines.
Oh,
right.
So behind it, it's behind it.
Yeah, and so it's behind the black line.
Even making a color-filled copy of the line art can prevent that fairly well too. If it's the color that you're using as your sort of base layer and everything, and that's your sort of starting point. Like this one appears to be that way. Like maybe you color shifted the line art page before you did anything else to it.
I should have, but I didn't. I had because I was talking to there's that artist Electric Prick or EPHK, who does fantastic work, and he sent me a whole thing about his process for how he colors stuff. And I did one cover in that process, and I was like, this works so great, because one of the dangers of when I do my stuff is if I am going through and bucket filling things, then sometimes if you hit a black line, it fills everything with a line, which you don't want. So you kind of have to avoid that or work under the thing, just like having a big brush or turning off the black lines to color a little bit. You can see that on this one, the one downside is that the like ideally I would not want these red lines underneath the black, because I feel like this is the kind of stuff that makes Sean's job a little harder.
Yeah, I don't mind that one quite so much. Yeah. So we actually, I actually had a fairly intensive pre-press technique for both of these books, you know, it's almost exclusively just about keeping the black, like you said, out of the other channels. So you want to
Sure.
have the black essentially. The line art essentially only have the black, but then you could have it reinforced since we have it on uncoated paper that doesn't have super rich black. I make scripts that basically grab the entire line art and then shrink everything a little bit and then dump the printer prescribed rich black formula underneath it. So if you looked at a page after I'm done pre-pressing on it, it's got like a copy of the line art that's shrunk, that's a dense black.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so it can't shift enough on press to ever show up, but it makes the large black solid areas richer than it would be if it was just printed with the one color. Anyway,
you got 2 layers of black kind of built into the file. Interesting.
Yeah, and the color mix of the black is like a 30% blue, 20% yellow, 10% red, and you know, it's like just reinforces it.
And then you got black on top of it.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Interesting. Sexy. That's why Living the Line books are so sexy.
Yeah, I mean, just as a sort of aside, like, I mean, I always loved uncoated paper, and I always thought your stuff would look super sexy on uncoated paper, and you know, get to live my dream to have you know, a couple hundred pages of work of yours on this quote unquote wood-free bamboo stock.
Oh yeah, no, it looks fantastic. I've never been as happy with my work as the Living Line stuff, like how it prints, and yeah, that's made me kind of want to try out different things. Like we're one of the books that we're talking about, which I think is our 3 books from now, if we include Moonray, is a book that I'm working on called En route, which the idea is to do it essentially as a black and white book with the final color signature in color.
Right.
Which
this is
what were we saying?
Oh, this is gorgeous. How did you? This is the starting point for this one, right? These 2 gradients.
Oh yeah, so I should bring up. So this is. I'll take off the gradients. So this is the thing where I have the very just flat kind of Tintin colors on this, or I'll take off even the sun layer. So if I take off all the external layers here of shadow, then there's just this very simple, like without the darker clouds, I think it would just look like it was just. I remember I had a colorist friend years ago in New York who would always complain, like his big dig against other colorists was that they colored the sky blue and the grass green, and he thought that was very basic and uninteresting. But
yeah,
like sometimes you just want to blue green grass. I don't understand the complaint. But yeah, so I have a gradient for the sky, and then I have a different gradient for the ground. If I take off the thing, you can see
that kind of just covers over all of those colors that you've got.
Yeah, and this one's like purple to pink, and then the sky gradient is basically just yellow to purple,
which you used in the last sequence of the first Moonray book pretty well, like without having it be like masked. When the hive attack, you've got the figure walking out. Anyway, sorry.
Oh yeah, exactly. And a lot of this is very. I saw a review that somebody wrote. I think it was a Reddit thing where someone was talking about. They were like, I think Shursho helped him with the colors on this stuff because my colors have been evolving since my other work, and I do like Shursho's coloring is fantastic, but I was like, hey, I've been studying this stuff.
Right. Yeah. So we should say Shursho did not do any color on your pages, and you did not do any color in his pages. You guys approach these independently.
Yeah, I do letter over his stuff, which is a big change on it. But yeah, Shursho stuff would be rough to color because it's like coloring Jeff Darrow.
Right, exactly. I was gonna say I don't envy him the task.
And he kind of takes.
I was going to say I have just the shadow for the tunnel in the top left here. I have a layer that's just the tunnel. And I'm not even naming, I named some of the layers. So I've got 2 layers of shadow over the tunnel for some reason because I decided it wasn't dark enough.
Gotcha.
Then the suns are their own layer, and it's also the reflection. This is my favorite thing about doing like sunset stuff, is being able to do these light highlights on things.
Yeah.
Just going around and seeing what the sun would hit.
Yeah. And so for something like the tree shapes that are in the background, that's entirely done digitally, but when you're drawing the page out, you have an idea that you're going to be doing that, or is that a decision that you make once you get to color? You're like, I want to pop that horizon
Oh,
out a
the
little
orange
bit.
stuff here?
Yeah.
Oh, those are clouds, but
Oh, okay. Because they're set down. But is that something that you see like in your head while you're working on it, or are you making decisions like that and the suns and stuff like, oh, when in the color phase, there's still room for improvisation?
yeah, I think a lot of it's figured out in color. Like I don't pre-plan enough. Like I don't know if I was planning on making this a sunset thing when I drew it.
Okay.
And the clouds I probably did in ink on the original, and then just knocked out the black line.
Okay.
I did that a lot, and sometimes I'll have clouds. There's a whole sequence in book 3 where I had a bunch of clouds that I did in the ink, and then once I colored the whole page, I just took the clouds out because I decided they didn't fit as well. And then it created a storytelling problem with me later on because the characters eventually end up in a castle in the sky. And so I had to create this whole thing where the castle in the sky is now hidden by this psychic field that you have to pass through. So you wouldn't have seen it in the sky anyway. And I feel like that's kind of, like I was talking to a novelist the other day, and they were talking about rewrites. And I was like, oh, you don't really get second drafts in comics. You do, once a page is finished, you can go back and change that page, but more likely you have to write the future pages to fit what you've already accomplished. And it creates lots of fun things like that. Like going back to Prophet, I remember there's being a sequence once where one of the artists I was working with, Yanni Milodianis, I remember he drew this alien character different sizes in different panels. And there was a thing of dialogue talking about how he had contracted his whole form a little bit. And so it's always this fun game of being like, how do we explain the art inconsistencies?
Right, because redrawing a page is absolute madness. Take it from
yeah, exactly. And if you can not redraw, and also it creates fun problems too.
Yeah. And I saw that you did this trick a couple times in book 2 where I was doing the pre-press and I was like kind of investigating like, oh, well, this pyramid, oh, it is in the original art. Look at that. He just erased it. I think there's a double page spread with one of the pyramid weapons where, you had done it in with actual black and, pen and ink, and then gotten rid of it once you had the color in place.
Yeah, and more embarrassing, sometimes I'll do it in pen and ink and then have to do it on another sheet of paper and paste it in.
Oh.
Yeah, and I mean that's a good thing because a big part of it is becoming less precious with the lines. Because I mean I think that helps with speed a lot.
Yeah.
Let's see what other pages I have up here. Oh yeah, here's
one's gorgeous.
The 2-page spread of the Undertown. This is kind of me doing the same techniques where I'm showing the kind of the Undertowns all lit up by these mushrooms, and so I'm showing these kind of mushroom light highlights on everything.
Right.
I have a funny story about this, Brendan. You had sent me a picture of this as a message on Instagram, I think. And it really stuck in my memory hard. And I had read the galley copy of Moonray that Sean had sent me. And then when I got the actual hardcover, I was like, it's missing that one image that I really loved because I thought it was in the galley image. This just speaking to like how strong this image is, it was so much in my head. I assumed I had seen it in the book.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
so I'll be very happy to have it in book 2 where I actually get to see it in the book.
Yeah, this is the second chapter of book 2 or Moonray chapter 7. But yeah, the original for this page is much less striking because the black is almost entirely done in Photoshop. I think I did this one pillar in
Can
ink.
you turn that layer off? And we can see
well,
you did it in the
I think I actually condensed it down.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just I think I have like rough brush strokes here that kind of denote it. But I can kind of knock out some of the layers on this. And in this one I have a gradient layer that didn't work. Like I tried to do a red gradient and decided that it just made things look a little muddier.
Yeah.
But you can see one of the things I was having fun with is I was erasing all the gradients when there was water to kind of make them look like they're glowing.
Yeah. So is it because it's hot? You think that is not quite communicating the same thing? Uh,
Yeah, that might be it. Yeah, because the whole thing works really nicely, just being kind of like even the yellows are kind of cool.
right.
And it muddies up like how impactful that silhouette is, I think, too. Like the
Hmm.
silhouette doesn't pop as strong against all that darker.
Yeah, it's kind of too much. Let's see. Let me take off some of the other colors on here. This one has a lot of layers. Like normally when I think about how I do a page, it's like I have a color layer and then I have a shadow layer and then the ink layer is kind of all I need. And so these Moonray pages, you can kind of see how much more I'm spending on color
Hmm.
Hmm.
by how many layers I'm doing. So yeah, on this one again, I have this kind of under layer,
Hmm.
and that's a really good example of just like I colored everything this kind of yellow brown, and then just kind of colored up from that.
Right.
And then over that, I just have this shadow layer, and then some lights, and some of these I don't know remember which one of these meant end up
Mm.
in the final thing, but yeah, it's kind of just building up different layers of different. That's the one we didn't use. Yeah, and then this one is just all the reflections, and you can see I've got this layer over the, if I put this on, like this layer is over the gradient, so if I knock it underneath it, you lose all the
Gotcha. Yeah.
shines
Hmm.
from it.
That's one of the things that I really noticed in Moonray is that there was a, like I said, a massive kind of evolution in the color where that seemed to hold more of the weight of the art than before and let you get like uh more open lyrical passages. And so seeing you like, because I would have assumed that all of your stuff was exactly what you said previously. That's what your books look like to me, as line art, flat color, and
Sure.
maybe some shadows. And now seeing this, it's like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes more sense why I was picking up that vibe.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's hard for me not to view it as cutting corners, even though it's just kind of a better way to present things sometimes.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Because I used to think of the way that I would kind of put value in the work would be, excuse me, would be to put a ton of jokes in the background, a bunch of little hidden things. Excuse me. And I think it's actually something I got from Mobius, where you talk about how there's two ways to impress a reader. You can either put a ton of detail in something, or you can just draw something simple and beautiful. You know, and one of
Mm-hmm.
those is obviously uh, much less harder to guarantee. Like you can kind of guarantee detail, but you can't guarantee
Hmm.
beauty.
Yeah,
That's
and it's just like you have to, everything matters so much more when you strip down each shape, each line.
Certainly. And something that helps me in drawing things like this is is figuring out what's going on in all the scenes while I'm working on it. Like I was like thinking like, oh, this is like an apartment complex, and the people that will come out, and this is like a this is like a incense machine that makes the whole place smell slightly nicer. And then this is probably like cooking fires, like just things to kind of keep myself. And when I would do my multiple warheads or King City stuff, I would do kind of ridiculous versions of that. Like, remember there's a multiple warhead sequence where I did this giant building in a big spread, and I was just spending the whole time thinking about how it was a bunch of bear astronauts, and like what would bear astronauts need, and this is their rocket, this is where their kitchen is, and everything. And so this is kind of a more serious version of that, but kind of the same thing.
What are these little onion headed creatures? Yeah, these guys that with the glowing mushrooms behind them.
But these guys, these are basically like tubers that they've carved out to build into houses. So these are like
Okay.
windows on roots.
of course, Carson.
Potato houses.
Yeah,
Well, no, like now that he's like, okay,
Yeah.
he's thought all of this through, it's like that's one of the things with your work is all of that has a decision behind it, but you don't always feel the need to tell us. Like you'll put a lot of notes in there and stuff to tell people, but there's a lot that's just left like that's what it would be if you got dumped on an alien world. You'd be like, what fascinating forms these are. What the hell? But it all makes sense, like because there's so many of them up there too. It's obviously
and that's a cool
uh,
thing when you once I feel like in this there's a couple different things that I'm working with. It's like I have these, like I have the tubers, I have the the mushroom lights, and I have the pools, and then I have basically the pillars that are carved,
Mhm.
and then I'm basically making everything from those like 4 elements,
Right.
like
That's
different variations of it.
I've been watching this show called Face Off that's about like people designing and then building movie monster makeups.
Oh, cool.
And they one of the judges on there constantly uses this term form language, which I've never heard before, but seems very rudimentary for that field. And like that's what you're doing. You like there's a form language of how tubers grow and exist in the world. And by picking those and sticking to them, you create these consistent visuals. And I've just really come to fall in love with that term. And it
Sure.
seems like you're doing that very, very instinctively. And and you would tie that to your decisions about the cultures of each kind of creature, each society and things like that, that they have their own
Yeah,
visual form language.
right, totally. And I think that ties into something that's really in tied into comic books, where in comics you're basically like telling a story with pictures, so you're creating your own visual language, and that you can be like, you can kind of train the reader to be like, oh, this is like I could, if I use more of these mushroom things, it could be like, oh, that's just what a light looks like in this universe. And so I could have a panel where someone has an idea, and they, instead of getting a light bulb over their head, they just get like a glowing mushroom.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it creates this like whole visual thing. Something that it was making me think about too is a friend of mine recently was helping someone else, like he got hired to be a editor, like a editor on a comic, and he's going in and correcting kind of newer artists' work on the stuff. And one of his big critiques was that the guy makes lines that he doesn't know what they mean.
Hmm.
And I think that that's an important thing when you're drawing, is to kind of at least have an idea why you're making a line.
Hmm.
You know, like one of my critiques of like the early kind of 90s superhero comics, they would just have these cross-hatching lines over people's faces and things like that that didn't seem to serve a purpose. And so I think that even if you're doing that stuff, there has to be like your own kind of visual language of why you're doing a thing.
Yeah.
Although now I want to bug those 90s superhero guys and be like, what are those lines? What do they mean? Because they probably had their own internal logic.
I showed some of that. I had like the Jim Lee X-Men Artist Edition I was looking at with Tori, and I was like, she was like, what is all this? And I was like, I don't know why they do that. And I think then me and Sean talked about it, and or
Knives. Yeah, we
knives.
did it.
It's
We
all
did
like
it.
everything's composed out of knives.
We
Like
did a
everything's
Scott. We
sharp
did a
and scary.
We did a Jim Lee Scott Lobdell recreation, and we decided that it was the ultimate act of aggression to crosshatch everything with knives,
And
because they're
speed
all
lines.
exactly
Like
right. Our speed
you're
lines.
creating value with speed
I think
lines. Yeah.
some of that stuff was those guys building off of Michael Golden and Arthur Adams, and Arthur Adams and
Yeah.
Michael Golden are both like painstakingly technical artists. I mean, especially Michael Golden, when he'd do those G.I. Joe comics, and he would have, you know, he'd draw like a Cobra Hiss tank and draw like everything exactly in the background. Like it was like a Where's Waldo Cobra Hiss tank.
Yeah.
And then you have someone who's doing that kind of the term is always prison art. You got nothing but time.
Yeah.
So if you have a prison artist like that, just in their cell chipping away at drawing everything exactly, and then you bring in like a Rob Liefeld who's just like, I'm gonna draw a Deadpool with samurai swords with 7 blades on each handle,
Right.
and it's just like a very different outcome.
Yeah.
Here's
Anyways.
another Hiroshi Yoshida print that's very simple.
Wow.
And those clouds again, I see that influence a lot in Moonray. Yeah.
Yeah, his stuff's really interesting to me, because I feel like it's one of those things that because he's influenced, like I see his stuff in Mobius and certainly in Erge, that you kind of, or it's like kind of coming home, just like, oh, that's I understand what he's doing, you know.
Yeah, the
Right, because you've
desaturation.
you've gotten like a 3rd generation transmission of it. So when you see the original thing, it's familiar to you.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and that's an interesting thing, is kind of like the currency of art. Like there's certain things that are really successful that I don't understand why they do them, and so it doesn't really click with me. Like there's certain type of almost like modern American animation coloring that kind of, or even modern, even a more dramatic example is modern superhero comic coloring just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Like I think we said in a recent video about how it's like a lot of work to make something look worse.
Yeah,
And so
the
it's really nice
doorknob
to see.
coloring.
Yeah, and it's easy to find bad stuff, but finding this like Hiroshi Yoshida stuff where it's like incredibly beautiful and simple, and it's just like you look at something like this, it's just like, how do I do that? You know, like I feel
Yeah.
like that's a much more exciting question than trying to figure out how to do better stuff than bad stuff. So
And
it's a
it's
little
more
blurry.
difficult because it really takes a level of acuity and sophistication and like really refined taste, which is, you know, something else that when I look at your colors, it's not just the techniques of how you put them together. You know, I don't think you're doing anything revolutionary in Photoshop, but a lot of it is just your choice of palette, which is a taste thing. And
Yeah.
to develop that is, I don't know that there is a straightforward answer. Like, Brandon, how do you pick your colors?
I mean, I used to always talk about how I used to joke about it as like a JFK assassination technique, because I would take the color picker, or I can do that on here. You take a color picker and say you have a red here, and I would just go up and to the left. You know, in the JFK movie, they'd be like back and to the right, back and to the right, about where the bullet came from.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's an up and to the left technique. But lately I've gotten much more into just doing brighter colors, like spot colors on things.
Mhm.
You know, like I was talking about on this other page with the way I'm using the yellow to kind of pop everything out,
Right.
or the brighter reds. It's like I'm not trying to mute everything. I'm just like I like to have a kind of a muted base, and then having things like the oranges and the yellows and the reds that kind of accent that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one, this picture I really like because it almost feels like it looks damp when you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was actually just talking about like doing landscape painting with my painting class, and we were looking at Monet's haystacks,
Hmm.
and I was
I
having
saw
them
some of those
like
in person.
they have that same thing, right? Where you can
Yeah.
like he'll paint 3 snowy days, and you're like, this is a snowy day when it's 10 degrees outside and it's dry. You know, there's no humidity in the air. And then you look at another haystack and it's like, this is like 25, 30 degrees out and it's humid, cold. And he can convey that in his color choices is
Totally. And my
astonishing.
understanding is it that Monet went back and would just repaint the same haystack over and over different days of the year.
Yeah, and the same like cathedral, the ruined cathedral. The haystacks, I'm not sure is the exact same ones. I'm sure the farmers were moving them around. But yeah, going back to the same general place and trying to capture that same scene in different times of day, different temperatures, yeah, different seasons. And I mean that's why he's has such that sensitivity to light and color, I think, which is what you're talking about here as well.
A super subtle gradient in the background there just gives you the sense of, a day not quite being strong enough to burn off the fog.
Yeah.
And something
Yeah.
about the blue being set back too. It's a really wild image there.
Yeah, it's a pretty one. Yeah, this is a much kind of a simple, I guess a more complicated version of that.
Yeah.
This one looks more like a print to me. Like you can kind of see
Right.
Yeah, and it almost like
the
has
colors
these weird
interact.
like dry brush looking stuff on the wall, which is really weird for that style of working the wood block.
Yeah.
Like I can't imagine what they were doing to get that
Different set of carving
texture,
tools. Yeah.
like sanding or something. It
Yeah,
is kind
maybe.
of
That
strange
makes sense.
looking. I've never seen that.
I don't remember what he was doing, but I watched a YouTube video on uh, kind of the Japanese printmaking, woodblock printmaking, and the guy at one point used some oil off of his forehead to 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 get a technique.
Right.
Wow. He was
Like a
just like
resist.
yeah, staining the wood a little bit
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
to push the ink off.
I was
Huh.
just reminded that I have a very uh, when I finish erasing pages, sometimes I'll take a T-shirt and just wipe the page, so when I scan it, it doesn't have eraser on it.
Do you use a
Uh,
drawing glove or anything?
no, I
Like hand oil or
yeah, and it's funny because the page I was showing you before, it has this. Let's see if I I'm not on the share screen again, but yeah, it has these big smudges on the side of it that I don't know where it came from. And so it's one of those things where you're like, oh, there's just weird ink smudges on the side of this that I don't think were from my pen. So that's just something to fix in Photoshop.
God bless Photoshop.
Yeah, it's made us all. Yeah, I mean, looking back at that's kind of my interest in looking at these two and looking like lately. I've been watching a bunch of old Disney movies, and it's really fascinating when they don't have like the Photoshop tricks, and they have to have different ways of, you look at early comic books, and if they make a mistake, sometimes they'll do a paste over, like they'll just draw on another piece of paper and glue it over. It's their Photoshop.
Like that Disney switchover that happened in the early 70s or late 60s when they decided that the photocopier was available, and they were like, well, why would we keep an ink team employed to clean up all the lines when we could just photocopy the pencils? And then all of a sudden you have the movies where they're talking and someone's gesturing with their hands, and invisible construction lines keep on jumping out for 2 frames at a time,
Yeah, I kind of like that, like the 101 Dalmatians.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that's thought of as like kind of the dark era of Disney, because I think that was when Walt Disney died around then, and they were kind of, what do we do now? But I think it's really fascinating, the stuff that came out of that.
Yeah, I don't mind it at all. I think it's just a different flavor, Well, this is wild too. This is the same artist.
Yeah, these are all Yoshida.
Looks AI. The way
I've seen a couple artists whose art looks like, I saw somebody's Instagram profile, and in the bio it said not AI, because he was just doing this very slick anime style work, and I was like, it really sucks to be those guys right now. It's basically the guys who are kind of generically popular. They start to look, and if you're a little too good, it starts to look like AI.
Yeah. It's this middle part with all the boats, how it's like piecing them up into these puzzle pieces. You kind of get that look now where it'll like outline it and color it in. But also, the thing that immediately jumped out at me is so gorgeous is the line going across that boat in the back that has the sail up, and it's just broken in the middle, like the light. Yeah, that's gorgeous, because it's like the light is just, like you can't see that part of it. You wouldn't. That's amazing.
Well, look at the post of the boats being deformed by the ripples without any visible rippling, which of course itself is not generally visible.
Yeah.
That's gorgeous.
It's almost like a cartoon waggle.
Right. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah. And there's also something that really comes out like this section of the water over here really looks like, it really gives the impression he went there and he drew this. This is not a picture out of his head.
No.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's something that's the, especially look back at Mobius's stuff. He's incredibly reliant on reference photos sometimes. And I think because he can work without them, but then he'll do certain things like the water effect here, and you're like, oh, there's no way that that's out of your head.
Right.
And even knowing to color, like the reflection of the door is not that like yellowy, tanny color. Like he's seen how the refraction of the light on the water is distorting the colors and all that kind of stuff. Or making the compositional choice that having that bright color down there is just messing it up. So he's choosing to do a cool color in there anyways.
Sure.
That's gorgeous.
Do you have an explicit image that you explicitly use this as a reference or inspiration for?
I haven't had the nerve yet to do the water that he's doing. I've been doing a water technique lately that I got from there's a French artist who did that PTSD comic. I'm spacing on his name right now.
Is it the Bolay?
Yeah, that's his name. But yeah, he did this this swimming pool drawing that has these kind of outlines of circles, and so I've been kind of imitating that a little bit. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I feel like in making art, you can both pull from other artists and pull from reality, and the goal is to take a little bit from each and not rely too much on other artists or like I feel like sometimes relying too much on reality can create things that feel like like I almost want to be tethered to the comic book language a little bit still. Should I open up some more pages, or are we?
No, I think this is good. Let's
I think that's good.
Yeah, no, it's Fantastic, man. I've been very curious to get you to talk about this like explicitly because, you know, I feel a little bit like the guy who was rummaging through your underwear drawer by going through the layered files, you know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was thinking about it when we were talking about this. One point, Tomer Hanukkah left his, let's see here. Am I doing the share screen now?
No, you're good.
Okay. Tomer Hanukkah left a bunch of his originals with me when I lived in New York, and I got to look through a bunch of them. And he's the guy that first taught me how to color in Photoshop, which I just got his new art, by the way.
He's fantastic. Both him and his brother are fantastic artists.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is another thing, kind of going back and like looking at what Tomer's doing in these pages is really kind of harkening back to me being like, oh, that's where I got that, you know. Like he's doing a lot of
monochrome.
This nice Blade Runner one.
Ooh.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he's so good.
And Tomer's the first artist that taught me. Here's the full thing of Blade Runner. He's the first artist that taught me that you could just pull images sometimes from Google into your drawing. He was doing these tattoos on characters where he would just find like a black and white image and pull it into Photoshop and paste it over his drawing, and it just looked like something he had drawn.
Like bringing it in as a smart object.
Yeah. Yeah, this is pretty stuff.
Yeah, he's great. I haven't seen that book, but I remember him doing covers like back in the late 90s, I think was the first time I saw him doing stuff for Vertigo.
Yeah.
But you had some of his original art, so this was the rummaging in the underwear drawer equivalent?
Oh, I didn't even have it. He just left it in my place because we were hanging out at one point, and he was like, I got to go do something else. Can I leave these with you? Because I used to work in coffee shops a lot, so I had my portfolio with me. So I just held on to it, some of his pages for a couple of weeks, and I remember I had them above my desk, and I kept going through them and being like, "Oh wow, they're so clean," you know.
Yeah, well, I hope that anybody who has watched this, will go out and take a look at preview video for Moonray Book 2. If you haven't watched or haven't read Book 1 yet, definitely check it out, and pick up Brandon's other stuff as well. I've been really enjoying my Prophet reread. I took too much time between Book 3 and Book 4, so I had to go back to Book 1 again. So apologies with that. But yeah, I mean, you've done a lot of amazing work, and it's been a real pleasure to get to be a very small part of this new section. So thanks for doing this, and thanks for talking.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I'd say a very big part, but I mean, I feel like it's changing the way that I'm working with you, which is really, really fun. Like I'm always kind of prickled at the idea of comic books being collaborative because I often did everything just myself. I'm like, I'm going to learn to letter and color and everything, but it's working with the right people really affects things. And so like just knowing that I'm working with you on the production on this and communicating with you about stuff is very informative in how I'm making the work that I'm doing too. That's cool.
Awesome. And Moonray Book 3, not that far away in terms of artwork being put together anyway. So
yeah, I think I'm at least a third of the way done with Book 3. Is only 60 pages by me because there's more work by Show, and we've got another team that did a 20 pager. So yeah, I mean, I'll be on Book 4 in no time.
Yeah.
Dear Lord, Brandon, cruising through this book.
Well, thanks again, and thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you soon.
Make sure to like, smash that subscribe button, and ring that bell.